And welcome into the Radio Days edition of Now and Next. This week, sitting at the round table on Moore in the Morning on News Talk 1010 Toronto.
On round one, Alex Creston is here, Vice President at Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Mayor of Toronto. Dave Trafford, Chief Executive Producer at Story Studio Network. And Tamara Cherry with Pickup Communications and notably author of The Trauma Beat, a case for rethinking the business of bad news. We're obviously going to start with the OPP report, and Dave Trafford, I'll start with you, and I'll give each of you a go-round to take this in whatever direction you want to, because I don't want to frame the discussion. I want you to be able to express whatever impression, whatever hot take you have on it. So, Dave.
I just think this illustrates the difficulty with police investigating police. I appreciate the comments from Mark and Chris earlier in the show, given their background and their long careers and honorable careers in policing. But at the same time, given the backdrop of everything that's going on with our Toronto police force, this to me suggests that, again, we have a cultural issue. John Burnside pointed this out earlier in the week on your show with the Toronto police. We have issues in terms of competency now, clearly, and the chief has made that clear. The fact that the OPP did not include Zameer in terms of the review of what was going on. They went to great detail to reconstruct everything. They went to great detail to look at notes and everything else and talk to the police officers involved, that they did not involve the man who was accused in this case. I think there's all kinds of problems with this, and all it does is create more concern. It creates more muddiness. It makes the puddle muddier, if you will, around the whole thing. And at a time when, police are trying to deal with their own reputation and rehabilitate their reputation. And, we'll always say one bad apple. Okay, well, if this begins to be the thing that reinforces that, I think it's problematic for police forces just generally. It does not necessarily change the outcome of the trial, though. So let's be clear about that, too.
Chief Myron Demkew and the Police Association President Clayton Campbell were somewhat defiant yesterday in saying, that's it, that's all. Here's the report. The judge was wrong. The cops were right. And Alex Creston, I guess that is the conclusion if you buy everything that is in this report.
I think these situations are just so horrible. At the end of the day here, a police officer died, and there's a family missing with an empty seat around the table. And as for Mr. Zameer and his family, they went through a horrible situation as well, and it's been dragged out. And unfortunately, what's going to happen here is that the people who support the police are going to continue to say that this is vindication. The people who hate the police are going to continue to poke holes and say that there is collusion or other issues, and we're going to end up no better off for it, and our streets will be no safer.
Tamara Cherry, your take.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, John. My blood is boiling right now. Dave, I have a lot of questions for you about what you said. A cultural issue. I don't know what cultural issue was painted yesterday. I'm going to leave that there for a second. An issue with competency. Absolutely. I absolutely understand questions coming up around that. And something I will say is if there's been any suggestion or overtones, as I think there has been some, that police officers are not upset with the way that things went in this, I would say that is definitely not true. Just as with when Project South came out, I was hearing from all sorts of different Toronto police officers from all across Canada, frankly, who were so upset at these allegations because they're like, this is not what we are about. This is not what we represent. Police officers are upset with how things went down in this as well. The fact that the OPP did not include Zameer, why in the world would the defendant or the defense lawyer be included in a perjury investigation? The OPP was not looking at whether or not he committed this homicide or where the police officers were at the time that this happened. They were looking at whether these police officers lied in their notes, whether they lied on the stand. And this investigation found that it did not. The fact that police are investigating their own, I don't see this as an issue at all. Or at least I would point out that we didn't see this as an issue when YRP was investigating TPS and laid these corruption charges just a month or two ago. So we can't have it both ways. The fact that the man who was accused was not involved, I don't think that we should be reading into that at all. And I watched the news conference yesterday. Chief Demkew addressed this, and I think that he did a pretty good job considering how, I think, confounding that question is, that it kept coming up over and over again. This was a perjury investigation. It had nothing to do with the defendant because he was not being accused of perjury at all. I am thinking about those officers who were there that day and saw their colleague die in front of them, and then they had to go ahead and do police work as they do. I think that that is something that has not really been considered. The emotional toll, and did people get things wrong? Like, clearly things were done in ways that they probably shouldn't have been done. And I'm speaking to the traffic reconstruction stuff, but mistakes are made and that does happen. But at the end of the day, like, my heart breaks for all the officers who are involved, not to mention the Northrup family, the homicide investigators who would have had to look at this, even, yes, the traffic reconstruction officers, because they were investigating one of their own. But to say that this speaks to cultural issues within policing, you know what I would say this speaks to? The cultural issues of our society, to immediately say that if police are saying one thing and somebody else saying the other thing, then the cops must be lying, that there must be malicious behavior, rather than seeing police officers as human beings who 9 times out of the 10 knock it out of the park. And when something goes off just a little bit, they're automatically the villain. And I think that it is very unhealthy that we jump to that. I'm not making a lot of sense, but you can hear my passion in this. It's upsetting.
I'm wondering, Dave, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, clearly that you're slightly, and I use that word advisedly, overstating the issue here, Tamara. The point is that given the current circumstance, the view of how we see our police right now with Project South, with everything that's going on, okay, people who are not as close to it as you are, there is a general perception in the community that, oh, we've got a problem with our policing in Toronto.
Where's that perception coming from? It's coming from comments like that.
Please. Our Toronto police chief is actually saying he's got a problem, and now he's digging in and he's investigating the police in his own force. We've got this situation showing where the OPP is showing that there are problems with the investigative tactics and strategies of Toronto police in terms of reconstruction. We are not talking to the Zameer in this case, who has vital information. I mean, they went to the reconstruction team, but the OPP goes to all the extent of going right into the detail of what kind of dust was on the car and whether or not the sensors went off, everything else. But there was no sense of and you bring up the emotional impact of the police, and I'm not diminishing any of that. I'm not suggesting it wasn't a difficult day and a difficult time for the police officers involved. I appreciate that entirely. But the fact of the matter is, this man was in the car with his family when this happened. His emotional state has as much to do with what happened on that morning, on that day in the car, than anything else that happened.
Not with perjury.
It does if in fact he contradicts what they were saying in the courtroom. What he's saying and what deconstruction's saying.
That is not what the OPP was investigating, though. They were looking at, did these officers collude?
That is my point.
Okay.
My point is that it wasn't broad enough. You've got police investigating police, and it's pointy-headed, and there is no resolution here that everybody's going to be satisfied with.
Okay, so let's listen in to the head of the Police Association, and this is my next question to you. Has the judge been found fundamentally in error, and does she have to apologize?
Today, I take the first step in demanding accountability by publicly asking Justice Malloy to make things right. Because of Justice Malloy's comments, our members were accused of tarnishing the memory of a deceased colleague. They were publicly shamed, the reputation of an entire profession thrown into question. Most insulting. While Jeff's grieving widow, Margaret, and colleagues sat just feet away, she apologized to a man who killed a police officer.
Alex Creston, I'll start with you since you haven't had a lot of room on this particular roundtable. Was she fundamentally wrong? I mean, if you go by the contents of this report, then yes. But the problem is she was dealing with the facts and evidence she had in front of her.
Yeah, but I do think that there's when we do want to talk about a cultural issue that's leading to a flaw in our the way that we deal with crime in this city and in the country is that I don't think that the police have much faith in the judicial system. And this is just me watching from from my comfortable seat, but I'm able to look at this and say that we've heard that the Toronto police don't press charges because they don't think that things will lead to convictions. We're hearing now a judge openly calling into question whether police were lying and not having much to go on that. And is it any wonder why it seems as though police aren't doing their job? They aren't arresting people. They aren't pressing charges, and people end up back on the streets anyways, even when they do. So yes, I do think that the judge has a responsibility here. This is a role in our society that is extremely important, that we give a lot of power to judges, but we place no accountability on them. So 100%, I think that if you're ever asking the question, should judges have accountability for things that they do and they say, yes, 100%.
Well, actually, they do because they have supervising judges. But Dave Trafford, your thoughts?
More judges.
Yeah, I don't think that there's an apology required here for two reasons. First is the based on what happened in the courtroom, there's no basis for it. Second, I don't think that this particular judge should be required to apologize for every other judge or whatever happened in a courtroom, just as we don't account for every police officer being accountable for every other one. The second thing is, though, and Mark Mendelson brought this up, there was already the opportunity for the police, the defendants here in this case, to look at this and say, or the defendants, the police officers, and say, we had the opportunity to bring up and deal with the collusion issue in pretrial, and we did not. So there's a lot of worms in that can that already suggest that they were trying to avoid it, that they could have avoided it and didn't avoid it. So it was kind of the thing that was going to fall on them one way or the other.
And Tamara, there's only 30 seconds on the clock, but last word.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that an apology will be coming, nor do I think that it should be pushed. I absolutely understand why Clayton Campbell would be asking for one. He's speaking for his members. He's speaking to the hurt that they're feeling. That said, she was commenting on the evidence that was in front of her, and there might be other questions to be had as to how she could come to having that opinion. Did she go outside of her lane a little bit? Absolutely. I don't think she should have said some of the comments that she did, but it's not the first time and it's not the last time that we've heard judges express their own personal opinions and emotions on cases like this.
Thank you all. Alex Creston, Dave Trafford, Tamara Cherry.
Now and Next is an Eye Contact production.